John, the customer says the brakes just don't feel right in this vehicle. I've got to agree, they kind of feel glazed over to me. So let's get this thing in Tech Garage and see what's going on.
Welcome to Tech Garage, presented by RockAuto.com. Well, we got our Silverado up on the lift, and we took all the wheels off because you always want to do a visual inspection. Kind of looked around, didn't see anything obvious, you know. But Dave, we really need to focus on this disc brake system, and I could sure use your expertise, man. So,
well, as I look at this, first of all, I thought it might be glazing over. That's kind of when we were driving it. Maybe there was something on the surface of the rotor. There's not. So this appears to be normal. I looked up here, checked the hard brake line coming in is fine. Looks like the connection's good, and the soft brake line is down here. Now that has to be soft because the suspension, it needs to be able to move up and down, and this needs to be able to move with it. These soft lines are double lined, so sometimes it'll collapse on the inside, the inner liner, and you may not see that. But if it is collapsed, that means it would be pulling in this direction because the brake can't release. So we know that's not the problem, and this looks fine. And then also we have the ABS sensor here and the cable to it. Everything looks fine there as well. So for the visual inspection, just checking this out, I don't see anything that's wrong.
Well, Dave, I'm going to make things a little bit worse, okay? I got in here and I measured the pad, and we'll show it to you in the table a little bit later, but I'm measuring the pad right now, and I'm coming out with almost a brand new pad. So that's even weirder, I guess you could say, and no glazing like you said. Brand new pad. I mean, the pedal just doesn't feel right. I mean, I agree with them, but looking at it, I don't see no big problems.
Well, once you yank these off, and I'm going to go get new rotors and calipers, and we'll see what's going on.
Yeah, we got it covered. Go with RockAuto.com. All right, so if you guys, let's go back to the base of brakes, man. Base brakes 101. That's the whole key there. I mean, let's talk a little bit about brake fundamentals and coefficient of friction, rotors, and pads. So let's start right here. This is the rotor Dave was talking about. And on a disc brake system, the rotor spins around. Here's the actual caliper. This is called a floating caliper. The caliper actually squeezes and moves, and it contacts this rotor, and that's what the friction actually does, the stopping. Now, the friction creates heat, and when the heat has to be dissipated, you have to have a big rotor as a heat sink in order to do that. So spinning around, clamping, stopping, need good friction. You need a high coefficient of friction, and we'll talk about that right after the break. We'll look at that and see what's going on there. But let's take a couple of these brake components and break them down a little bit. So this is pretty cool. You've seen this a lot on Tech Garage. So if we're dealing with a floating caliper, this is a floating caliper. And what do I mean by a floating caliper is it moves. So I said when it contacts, it moves over to the left and to the right. So it's going to move on what's called these slides right here. So I'm a big advocate of doing brakes right. So make sure you pull these slides out. When you pull these slides out, clean them. Get you some good brake lube, put it on there, and make sure that those calipers are going to move. They got to move back and forth, all right? So that's one of the big things. This one, well, it seems to be moving fine. We're not hanging up. Dave mentioned the brake line. Nothing collapsed there because it's moving. It would be hanging up. Now, you have a sliding caliper. This is another one. Same thing, it moves, but it moves on these slides. So it moves back and forth on these slides to the left or right. And when it does that, see if I can move it. There it goes. Sticking a little bit, needs to be lubed, but if it moves in and out, you want to clean these guides or slides right here, and you want to go ahead and lube it up with the brake part lube. Now let's take a look at some of the cool tools we got at RockAuto.com. Now these are brake caliper retractors, and depending on your caliper will depend on which one you use. This one's pretty neat. This one you can basically use on all of them. It just kind of goes in there and you ratchet it back, and when you ratchet it back, you push the pistons back. This spreads and opens up. Now, if you have a single caliper, you can use one like this that just goes over the single and pushes the piston back. But in our case, we have a double piston, so I would use the double piston caliper. And they're pretty cool because these pistons would be out in a brake situation. You just put that on over the bracket, and then you go ahead and push it. And when you push it, well, we'll take the bracket off so I can show you. Let me take the bracket off. Put that on right there. And when I put it on there, I start pumping it up. And what's happening is this mechanism's holding and the pressure is pushing the pistons back in nice and evenly so you don't do any damage to those pistons, all right? Now what we need to do is we need to go ahead and pull ours apart. So that's a really, really simple process. I got my brake clean, I got my lube, I got my trusty bungee cord, and I got a hanger for the caliper because you don't want to let it dangle from that brake line. That's going to do damage to that brake line and hose right here. That hose Dave talked about, you need to take good care of that. Super simple on this truck. You just come back here, pop a couple bolts, break them loose. And when I break them loose, I'm going to go ahead and take these 2 bolts out. And like I said earlier, this is actually a floating caliper. It's moving back on these slides right here. So I got that one out. You can see it moves a little bit. The slides, we'll take them out and lube them. I'll probably send Dave back over here to put this thing back together. He does a phenomenal job when it comes to brake work. Sometimes it's good to have those patients like he has. Come through here and pop that off. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull the caliper off, and I can support it. I'll get my bungee cord or a hook or something, and I'll support it up there. But oh my goodness. Ha! I found the problem. You don't want to miss this. Stick around. I'm going to show you what's going on with this Silverado right after this break.